Now I'm going to open up a one of our files here. These are all our color correct files. Everybody should have access to these files here. Stuff to play with. More than likely, you're not going to play with everything that's in here, but you got the ability to kind of play around with some of these things. So I'm going to go into basic here, and I'm going to start with this dark picture file. Open this up here in my Photoshop. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Okay, that doesn't work. The hamsters are not listening to me this morning. Come on, guys. It shouldn't take this long to open up that picture. Thank you. All right, so here, convert to my color profile. Hit OK to open her up. All right, so this picture is graffiti artwork, probably shot under a bridge, so there's not a lot of direct sunlight or direct natural light happening. That's why it's kind of dark in this case. So I'm going to show you a couple of techniques that you can utilize to brighten this picture up. And you're going to be messing with or playing with brightness level and contrast. So brightness is how light or dark the picture is going to be. Contrast is going to be the difference between each one of the colors. So you want to make sure that when you're doing any type of adjustment on a picture, you want to make sure you're adjusting for both of those things. You want to make sure that the picture is bright enough or dark enough for what you need it for, and you want to make sure that you can distinctly see the individual colors. That's going to make the picture be that much more appealing and look a lot better to people, to most people. So we're also going to cover the different ways in which to apply these techniques. So that way you can see the good and the bad. So first, the bad. Background layer, only layer I got here. If I go to image and I go to adjustments, if I do this brightness contrast, which is what I'm going to start with, this is the filter applying directly to the layer. I just talked about that a little bit ago. That's the worst way to go because once it's applied, you can't undo it. You can't make adjustments or anything like that. So another way, another option is to take your layer and duplicate it. So if I duplicate the layer, this is what we used to do. I'm just putting a name to it, brightness and contrast. Then I can go to image and adjustments, and now I can apply brightness contrast. And it's applied to a different layer, not the original. So if I mess this up completely and I can't undo it or what have you, I can throw that layer away and just start the process over again. Make another duplicate layer, start it again. That's what we used to have to do. Filter by filter, color adjustment by color adjustment. We would create a duplicate layer of the previous adjustment and apply the next thing. Get that applied, make another duplicate layer. So you would have one file that would have like hundreds and thousands of different layers in it with different versions of the same picture with different adjustments applied to it or different filters applied to it. You don't have to do that anymore. There's so many other options that are so much better now that you don't have to do that. But if you still want to or need to do it, you could still do it. So duplicate the layer and apply this brightness contrast. Now, the way this brightness contrast works is you have this brightness slider that you can move to the left or right. You move it one way, things get lighter. Move it the other way, things get darker within the range of the picture. That's the one thing that I do like about this. You see where it says use legacy right here? If I check this on, this was the old way that brightness contrast worked, where with the legacy turned on, it would go like real blown out, overblown, or real dark to where there's nothing there. And so the range was just the range was not really controlled that well based on the picture. If legacy is unchecked, now it's looking at the picture itself that you're working on and looking at the data and just trying to get as bright as it can without overblowing it, overexposing too much or underexposing it too much where you can't see anything. So I do like this a little bit better than it was before. So I can turn the brightness up to get it, as bright as I can get it to be. And then I can play with the contrast. And again, same thing with the contrast. It used to be a very large range where if I went too high with the contrast, again, everything is blown out. Or if I go too low, everything would just be a big gray mass. There would be no different differentials between the colors. So, depending on the mood, depending on what you're trying to get out of the picture, how bright or vibrant or how dull and dark you're trying to go with, you could play with this brightness and contrast to kind of get the picture to look like you need it to look, even, if you wanted a low light situation, you can go low with the contrast and low with the brightness, and you'd still be able to pick out everything. Or you can go higher with the brightness, in even low with the contrast, where it's still bright enough to be able to see everything, but the colors are kind of dull and not bright and vibrant. I can go to the extreme on both sides, and I get real bright, vibrant colors, probably not realistic looking, kind of cartoonish, but it may be what you're aiming for with a large brightness. So that way everything is nice and bright and colorful and that sort of thing to use for whatever you're going to use it for. So you have the ability to do whatever range, whatever extreme you feel like going with. I hit OK, I get out of this. Boom, got this done with brightness and contrast. It looks good. I'm not going to say it looks bad. It looks good because good is based on judgment. It's not that bad of an issue. It's not that bad of a thing. But I'm going to show you another filter that you can apply, get the same results, similar results. In my case, my thoughts, better results. It's a little more complicated of an interface, but it can still get the job done. And you can do more with it than just brightness and contrast. And we'll talk about that more with it part as we go along. Also, I'm going to show you another technique that you can use instead of what I just did. So for this brightness contrast that I just applied to this layer, this is permanently done. If I save this file, close this file, come back to this file, whatever I did to this is just permanently applied. It's done. I can't do any other changes to it. Well, I can't fix it or get it reset back to the way it was to kind of start back over again. I'm just stuck. So here's another way this could be done. Same duplicating of the layer. Same. I'm not going to do brightness contrast this time. I want to do levels this time. So I'm just going to call it that. Levels is kind of my go-to adjustment for a lot of things because it solves a lot of problems. And then we'll talk about what it solves as we go along. Before I apply this levels adjustment, I'm going to right click on that layer that I just made, and I'm going to convert it to a smart object. Again, remind you, smart object, smart layer, smart filtering. They're all talking about the same thing. Being able to protect the layer, and it just protects the layer with this little icon sitting on the thumbnail of the layer there. That's all it's doing. But it protects it in a way that when you apply these filters, they're not permanently applied. Which means you could save the file, close it, open it back up, and you still have that filter sitting there that you can go back and make changes whenever you feel like it. So this is, I'm trying to temper the words correctly. This is my suggested way of covering the entire picture with any of the adjustments that you need to do. So any adjustment you need to make that has to cover the entire picture, I would go with this. It's just my recommendation. You don't have to do it just for that, but this is what I would do. So levels adjustment is just image and adjustments and levels. Levels and brightness contrast are kind of similar, where you can use this levels adjustment um, panel to change the levels, which is the amount of color in the highlights, middle tones, and shadows of your picture. Same thing with brightness contrast. With brightness contrast, with that adjustment, I'm adjusting the highlights, middle tones, and shadows, and adjusting the brightness level and the contrast at the same time within that brightness contrast. Levels does the same thing. I'm adjusting brightness and contrast in highlight, middle tone, and shadow. I just have more control. So it's a more intricate or more complicated looking panel, but you can do more with it. So here's what you're going to be able to do. Analyzing. First, you're going to have a thing called a histogram. If you are in photography, in the photography classes, Ms. V should have talked about the histogram that shows up on the screens for your cameras. Uh, Mr. Thomas and some of the cameras, film cameras that he has, the digital ones especially, may have a histogram sitting on there. That histogram shows you where the colors exist within the photo. Um, Underneath the histogram here, you have these three little tabs. One is all the way to the left is for your shadows. One in the middle is for your highlights. The one all the way to the right is for your highlights. Middle tones in the middle, mid tones in the middle, highlights to the right. I think I said that wrong, but sometimes my brain goes faster than my mouth. Um, so what I'm looking at, this little mountain rangey little smears and that sort of thing, is the color distribution across that shadow, midtone, and highlight area. Notice that I get a lot in the shadows going on with peaks and valleys, and then it pretty much drops off at the halfway point between the shadows and the midtones. And there's nothing after that. That's a bad picture, which means that this picture, if the person had a better camera where they could see this um, histogram, they could have made adjustments in exposure and f-stops and things like that to make this picture have more color distributed evenly across the shadows, middle tones, and highlights. What that tells you as the Photoshop user is that this picture is starting off bad, but it can be recovered through here, through this levels. How do you recover it? Well, first off, the histogram there, the peaks and valleys should be going all the way across, not in an even line. It should be peaks and valleys going, like a little mountain range. But you can take these little sliders underneath here, these little tabs, and you can move them. So if I move the shadow slider to the right, if it will let me, what is going on? Okay, that was added weirdness. It wouldn't let me grab the shadow slider for a second. I don't know why. But if I move the shadow slider over to the right, it's making everything darker. And then it gets into that. If I get into that range where there's nothing there, obviously there's nothing left in the picture. All the detail, all the information, gone right now. If I move the shadow slider back, of course, it comes back. Middle tone slider, I can take the middle tones, the 50% gray going up and down, and I can move that to the left or right. That improves the picture a bit, brightens it up, but it goes for the middle tones, and so the highlights are still, nothing is there. It's still real bright of nothing, and the shadows are starting to go away, starting to get not as uh, dark. Now, if I take the highlight slider and move it over, it moves the midtone slider as well. So now it's a little bit better, more controlled range of the brightness and the contrast at the same time. It's kind of doing them both, because the middle tone slider is really your contrast. Well, no, I take that back. Your highlight and shadow sliders are for your contrast control. Your middle tone slider is the brightness control. By moving the shadow or the highlight slider, it moves that midtone as well. So it's controlling brightness and contrast at the same time. So what I can do is bring this highlight slider just to where things start to ramp up. So right there, about that point there is where everything starts to ramp up. And now this kind of evenly distributes through shadow, middle tone, and highlight with the information that's actually here in the picture. So it's just readjusting the data that's in the picture to get something that's a little more realistic to what the picture actually should have been if this was shot correctly. So it's a way to make the correction. Um, for brightness and contrast, that's the way to go. For me, this levels adjustment is what I would use no matter whatever technique that I'm using. Whether I'm applying it directly to the layer or I'm doing the protected layer with the convert to smart object, I would use levels adjustment instead of brightness contrast. Can I get the same thing, similar results? Yes. Can I get better results with levels? My opinion, yes. I can get better results with levels. There are other opinions out there. They will use something else that'll work just as good. Not saying it's bad, not saying it's good, not saying that you can't do it. It's just another way of making it happen. So I can move this middle tone slider and see that's adjusting the brightness level within this contrast range to get a little deeper, richer colors going on while still keeping it bright. So the dark lines stay real dark, as black and dark as possible. And the lighter areas are still kind of bright and light as I want them to be. So I can make this adjustments all day and get this to what I want it to be. Now, with this being on a protected layer, when I hit OK, what ends up happening, just like with the filters, there's the smart filters filter mask that shows up. Again, you could paint on this filter mask with black and white or shades of gray to take, some of this adjustment away, in different areas, or, paint with white to bring it back. And then you'll see levels right there, which is the adjustment that I just did sitting there like the other filters. And I can double click on that to open up the same levels adjustment and, further tweak. If I realize, okay, this is not quite what I want to change it, just do that, hit OK, and I make the change. At any time, as long as that layer exists, with that smart feature on there, this levels adjustment will be here, for as long as I need it to be. Um, I can also apply any other filters too, by the way. I can go into any of my other filter options and apply any other filter, to this. And that looks terrible. Oh, by the way, I just to let you know, when you go to filter and artistic, all of these artistic filters, well, not all of them, but some of them are controlled by your two color squares. So if I got them as black and white, this colored pencil here is using, black and white as the colored pencil effect, plus the color that's already there. So if I change that from, black and white to two other colors, this colored pencil effect may look a little different, you know. Also, the sketch section, this is another one that's controlled by your foreground and background color squares, this craziness. So you can adjust, that as well by, picking two different colors, that would go for that. But let me go back to what I was doing here. I was looking at applying one of these, and I picked colored pencil. So I just wanted to see what it was going to give me. I just wanted to adjust and see. Yeah, that looks kind of neat. I hit OK. And this is something I just want to show you. Applying that, colored pencil uh, filter along with this levels filter. Now, here's where the color adjustment comes in. This looks nice, but now I need to make this picture a little bit brighter. So I can go back to levels. You get this warning telling you when you have more than one filter applied, it's telling you that it's going to turn off the other filter. So that way you can see the adjustment that you're making. So that's what that's for. But what I can do here is change the brightness level, hit OK. It reapplies everything. You just got to give it a moment to do so. So that way, again, with details, I can kind of play around with that. You can also change the stack order of things with these different filter applications. You can change the stack order of the filters, and that'll reapply and change how this looks for the better or for the worse in this case. Um, so you could do that, which is kind of a neat, fun thing. One last fun thing, because I love showing this piece off with that filter, there's this little icon on the ends. If you double click on one of those icons, it pops up this thing. This used to be a neat little feature that nobody really employed except those who were just in the know and being told that this existed. It allows you to change the blend mode and the opacity of that filter. So this is for colored pencil. I can change the blend mode of it. And let's say I change it to color. Well, that doesn't do anything. Let's go to overlay. Let's see what that looks like. So I can change the blend mode and the opacity of that filter application. So I can make that look different than what it was before. So I can make it a little more subtle by turning down the opacity. And depending on what I settle on with the blend mode, depends on how I can make this look, and give it, a different, totally different uh play on what this is supposed to be. And I don't know about you, but this is the kind of things that are kind of neat to me that you can do this and totally experimental because I'm just experimenting right now just to see, hey, what can I do with this? Because sometimes you can create something that looks kind of neat and kind of cool just by playing around. And the more you play around with it, the better it can kind of look. And I'm going to stop playing because nice and neat, but you see what it can be done. So again, the levels adjustment allows you to adjust the brightness and contrast of the picture. You also got brightness contrast, which does the same thing. Um, it's just a different way, so same deal, just a different way. There's another one, matter of fact, that I'll bring up. Let me turn these two off. Because I want to be fair and go over curves. Curves and levels do the same thing. They just look different with the application of them because of what you can adjust for and how you can make the adjustment. Some people love using curves because they either started off using curves instead of levels, or they just prefer the way curves works over the levels. But you're doing the same thing. Brightness and contrast control, plus the other things that I'm going to cover a little bit later. Now, before you use the curves, you got to make a choice. Am I going after the pigment percentages, which is like CMYK, pigments or inks? So the values that you get, the number values you get right here when you look at input and output, are going to be to that, or do you want to do values of light like um, RGB? So now you have your range value between a 0 and 255 levels. Which one do you prefer? That's really what it's asking you there. If you're me, I'm used to using levels. So I would show you this in the light version. How I would use this, usually if I'm in a CMYK file, if I got a file that's in CMYK, this would be set to pigment. But because this file is set to RGB, setting it to light. So what that does, if you look, notice that it changes that histogram in the background, going back and forth between the two, and it changes where the light to dark range is applied to on this curve line. Now, what you end up doing on this curve line, if I have this set to light, that means this top little node up here is my brightness point. And this bottom node down here is my dark point. Okay. So I can grab the node and move it just like I did with the levels, move it back over here to where everything starts to ramp up. And what did I do? I did the same thing that I did with levels. I'm able to increase the contrast and the brightness at the same time. All right. Now, if I want to change the brightness, then I go somewhere in between on this little ramp, this little line that I got here, this curve line, and I can click to add a point, and I can bring that point up or down, which will change the curve, which also changes the brightness level of the picture, just like I did with levels. So why is curves better than levels? Again, it's a matter of opinion. It's not that it's better, it's just another way of doing the exact same thing. And it's just you decide you want to use this instead of using something else. Okay. You even got the little sliders down at the bottom for a bright, for the highlight and the shadow slider, that you can move just like you do in the levels. So again, not that big of a difference between them. You do have, though, with this curves, the ability to do some real funky adjustments if you feel like it. Because again, with it being a curve, you can do some little fun color adjustment changes that you could still do over in the levels. It's just with curves, it can look a little more fun because you can add as many of these nodes as you want to the curve line and get some real interesting coloring things happening. And that's really where the magic of this curve versus um, the curve goes versus the other one with levels. It's a preference thing more than anything else. It really is because you can get the same things done in both of them. All right. Oh, one other thing that I want to show you since I did this weirdness with the curve. Let's say I did this and I don't like what I've done and I want to kind of start it all over again. Normally you would hit the cancel button, right? And, go back into this curves to try it again. Instead of doing that, Photoshop put in a neat little trick. The Alt key on your keyboard on Windows, if you're on Mac, this is the Option key. If you hold that button down, take a look at your cancel button. It becomes reset. So your cancel button becomes reset. All of the filters that you have in Photoshop, if you make an adjustment in that filter that you do not like and you want to start it all over again, just hold down your Alt or your Option key on your keyboard. Your cancel button becomes reset. You can click on reset and it resets. It puts it back to the way that filter was before you did anything. All right. So it just resets the filter application. So that way now you have the ability to start over again if you need to. So there you have it. So curves, levels, they both do brightness and contrast control, and they do it pretty well. They do a pretty good job. There's other things that levels and curves can do that brightness contrast by itself cannot do. And we're going to talk about that next. All right, so I have this done, and that's all I want to show you on this one. I'm going to close this and not save any of these changes because I don't need to. New file to open up. In that same basic folder that I pulled the dark picture out of, I'm going to go to the washed out beauty here. Do I want to do that one next? No, worldly lucre. I want to do that one next. This one is convert to my profile. Picture of money. Everybody loves money. There's a problem though. When this picture was taken, more than likely taken indoors with just whatever lighting was around, picture was probably taken like maybe they spread this money out on a table. They had maybe a camera coming from the top, face coming down, but there was no flash. It was just the ambient light that was bouncing around the room at the time when this picture was taken. So what ends up happening is that the color of the money reflects back into the camera, and most of our American money is kind of greenish in color, so that's why you get kind of this greenish kind of hue all over everything. It's called a color cast. uh Probably this picture was taken midday or something like that because there's a little brightness coming from this left hand side, so I'm assuming there was probably a window or something over there or what have you, some other light source, and it's shining on this, but you do have this kind of greenish color cast kind of going all over the place. So, besides the brightness and contrast, color cast is another issue that you got to correct. So, levels and curves can correct for that. Now, I like using levels. Curves has the same capability. I just like using levels better, especially in an RGB image. If it was a CMYK image, I may go over the curves to do it, but really don't have to because I can do it in levels and get the same thing done. That's just my capability. Now, I'm going to run through the same process. I'm going to right click and duplicate this layer. And should be levels. I'm going to right click on it again, convert it to a smart object. So that way it's protected. And I'm going to go to image and I'm going to go to adjustments and I'm going to choose levels. So again, levels and curves will do the same thing with this. It's just which one you prefer to use. Now, this histogram, as you can see, because it's a different picture, you got majority of the color in the middle tones, and where it gets to the highlight and the shadows, it kind of really falls off going towards the highlights in the middle, and then the shadows are kind of gradually ramps down, even though it's kind of a big slope, but it ramps down and there's some things over in the darker areas. But to increase the brightness and the contrast of this picture, if I move those outside sliders, that shadow slider, move it over some, not a lot, doesn't have to go over by a lot, just a little bit to where things start to ramp up a little bit more. And then same thing with the highlights, bring that over to where things start to ramp up. That's going to increase the brightness control and the contrast. I can see the differences between each bill now. Looks a lot better. I can use this middle tone slider to move it to the left or right to darken or brighten things up if I need to. Again, a little bit goes a long way. By the way, there are numbers underneath, and these numbers are kind of in level values, where one is the middle tone, and then you got 0 for the shadow and 255 for the highlight. So you could adjust that as you need to. And that kind of gives you the brightness and the contrast control you want, but there's still this green color cast all over the place. So, well, I can't pull this up now, but let me see if I can pull this up. Being on a Mac, I got the advantage of doing this. Hopefully, you guys will be able to see this when it pops up. Kind of a preview where, again, opposite of the green is what? Magenta. So if I can turn the green down, that'll add more magenta to the picture, and that will tend to give me a different balance of the color. So that way this color cast can look like it goes away. So how do I go about doing that? Well, right up here above the histogram, you'll see where it says channel. And from here, you could switch over to the individual color channels. And by switching to the individual color channels, what I'm able to do is I could switch over to the green channel. So now the histogram shows me the green color channel. And usually what I do is I go after the middle tone color. All right, so I go after the mid-tone on this. So that mid-tone slider, I move it to the left and I add more green to the picture. If I move it to the right, it takes the green away and it starts adding magenta, the opposite color. See that how that works? Now again, I use the middle tone slider because again, a little bit goes a long way. I usually don't even move the slider around. I just click down here where the number value is, and I use the arrow keys on my keyboard to go up and down with the value number. So 1 is where it started. So if you want, I can, press 1. That's where it started, and I can go up or down to increase or decrease the value by a little bit at a time. Or I could type in the number, or I could just use the slider to kind of slide it around to kind of decrease, one value and to increase another. And then I can go to the other channels too to help enhance this as well. I can go to the blue channel. And under the blue channel, if I increase some of the blue, that'll help. And then if I go to the red channel and maybe decrease the red or increase the red. See, if I go too high with anything, it's going to overly saturate. But if I just go a little bit, I'm not going by a lot, just a little bit, increase or decrease, I can change the balance of the colors. That's the whole idea. And by changing that balance, it gives me a better look without that color cast going on. Colors start to show up a little bit better. And you'll have to, maneuver this around and finagle this a little bit to kind of get it exactly the way you want. You could check your work. There is a preview checkbox here, and you can uncheck and check this on to kind of see what your progress is. So this is what it looked like before I did any of the adjustments, brightness, contrast, or the color cast, and this is after. So you could see that you have a big difference. Now, good or bad, this is how you could go about making this fix. I hit OK, and boom, done. And it gives me the levels to be able to come back to make further adjustments if I later on with new set of eyes that since I walked away and come back, see what looks like, a change or a difference or something like that that I need to fix for. So that's how that works. Very simple, very easy thing to do. It's very easy to do that. And majority of your work comes from this levels adjustment. because a majority of the problems that you have with pictures is just this color cast problem, brightness contrast problem, that you need a fix for.